everybody? Welcome back to the ATB NFL Live Show. We're back after a bit of a hiatus. Definitely need to take some time. People had some stuff to do. Totally fine. It's not like we missed anything. It's not like free agency started or the first pick of the draft got traded or anything like that. So I'm sure we can catch up pretty quickly, I guess, right? We won't have to skip over much. But no, it was good to have a little bit of a break after the season. So definitely want to jump right back into it, though.
Aaron Rodgers emerged from his dark retreat.
He did, yeah.
We're all having a great time.
Yeah, he had a good break too, as well. Looks like well, depending on how you look at it, maybe not a good break. We'll see how that kind of shakes out.
Terrible for the darkness retreat industry that he didn't come out with a clear decision in mind.
Yeah, right. Because he was kind of conflicted, and he comes out, and then he had to ask questions.
Still conflicted.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 days of just darkness meditation didn't do the trick. What will?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not really my cup of tea, so I can't say whether it's helpful or not. But
to each their own.
We'll definitely talk about him a little bit later. There's more pressing things that actually have happened, opposed to maybe will sort of happen or not. I don't know, whatever. So first thing we want to talk about, because we did miss this, the Panthers did move up to the first pick in the draft with the Chicago Bears for a host of things, including most notably, though, their top-paid wide receiver, DJ Moore. When the trade first happened, I assumed it was just going to be like the 3 first-round picks thing and your second-round picks, all that good stuff. When I saw DJ Moore's name in there, though, that's what really kind of tipped me off to okay, the Bears clearly are not just focused on just getting a couple extra picks, moving back, getting a big-time defensive player. They're trying to really build a foundation on offense for Justin Fields as a passer to kind of get him going more in that direction. We saw how explosive he was as a runner and at times as a passer last year, but we didn't really see a lot of explosive passing game. They didn't try to really use the passing game. Can't really blame them because, this team felt the need to trade for Chase Claypool just to get something going, and that clearly didn't happen for them.
Want that one back?
Yeah, I don't, but they probably do. But
I know Shayne doesn't.
I want it back. But again, they clearly are committed to try to making it work with Fields, and I think that's definitely the right decision. So I do want to. We'll kick off with Tony here. What do you think about the trade overall? Do you think it was the right move for both parties? Is it sway really hard one way or another for you, for one team or the other? Where are you kind of at with it?
Man, I'm just excited for it. I was ecstatic when it got announced. So to paint the context, the main reason we didn't have a show last weekend is my brother got married on Saturday of last weekend. I was the best man in the wedding. I was a pretty busy guy. So that news hit on our drive back from the venue. We were at the rehearsal. We were on our way to the rehearsal dinner. I was just blabbering about NFL stuff the rest of the night because I was so excited. I texted you guys. I was like, oh, I'm going to try to be ready for a show on Sunday. I'm going to try to pull myself together because we got to talk about this. Obviously, that didn't happen. Weddings tend to involve alcohol, and I drink heavily. But it's just really exciting. I think it's really cool for the NFL. I love when big trades like these happen, and the two teams involved, I think, were the teams a lot of people thought. I think a lot of people thought the Panthers made sense because they were picking 9, so they weren't in range of a quarterback falling to them. They weren't really in on the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. I think they talked to Derek Carr, but they, obviously didn't win that route.
Yeah.
And probably for the best. So they needed to do something, and their owner has a lot of money and a desire to win, and it hasn't gone well in his ownership stint so far. So this move made sense across the board. I think it's really good for both teams too. So the full trade is they sent number 9, number 61, which is a second round pick of this year. They sent a 2024 first round pick and a 2025 second round pick. They also sent DJ Moore, who's on a, depending on where you value him in terms of top 20 wide receivers, I think it's a reasonable deal. It's around $17 million per year, and those top of market receivers are getting much more than that. So
now we're gonna get in the 30
I think. Yeah, I think you know what you're getting in a player like DJ Moore. You know it is going to help you evaluate Justin Fields. It is the best pass catcher he has worked with so far in the NFL. You really wish you hadn't done that Chase Claypool trade, but that's said and done. You can't take that back. They still have a second round pick, number 39 overall, so that's a really good thing to have in your back pocket too. So for the Panthers side, they get their quarterback now. They get to choose their quarterback now. They get to set the foundation of the face of their franchise, of the future of their franchise. They have a perfect coaching staff in place for a rookie quarterback, with, Frank Reich being just all of his success across the board. I think they have Jim Caldwell in as some sort of offensive assistant. They've got Josh McCown as their quarterbacks coach. They just got a lot of good people in a lot of good places. The offensive line is sound. Obviously, they need weapons, but that can come, with other picks, with other free agent signings. So really positive for the trajectory of the Carolina Panthers, and I don't think they gave up too much. As somebody who lives in Charlotte, I am now excited to go to games. I want to see CJ Stroud out there slinging it. And then
that's question two that we'll talk about. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you know where I'm at with it, but
Yeah.
then the other side of it, the Bears, like I said, DJ Moore helps you evaluate the quarterback, and you have so much ammo now. And the good thing is, like, they spaced it out. They didn't get it all in one year where you have to like hit those returns right now. You have like continuous returns, and let's say next year you find out Justin Fields isn't the guy. Ooh, you have another first round pick. You can do something in the draft, or you can continue to trade back and stockpile picks, a la the Eagles, and just continuously build this juggernaut of assets to do whatever you want with. So really exciting for both sides, and just overall, like, man, it makes the NFL fun when there's trades like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Hard to really disagree with that. I do want to, before we talk about, I want to touch on this before we move on from this trade, about who they might be selecting or what else may happen, but I want to see what Zach has to say as well with this.
Yeah, I think Tony nailed the Panthers side really well. I think it was definitely a good thing for them. They're at a point now where, like, a lot of the quarterback for the free agency quarterback decisions have kind of already been made for the big people. So you make a splash, you go get your guy. You got Frank Reich. He's shown that he can coach a very good offense, and let him find his guy to come in and do all that. As for the Bears, I think it's a fantastic move for the Bears, because they basically like move forward a year or two on a rebuild. Because honestly, like, if we're being honest, the wide receivers that Justin Fields had and the tight ends that he had, there wasn't really many opportunities for him to throw the ball. And getting DJ Moore in there, that definitely gives him a very big weapon. You had Darnell Mooney and he was breaking out, but one guy that makes it very easy to scheme for defenses for a very young receiver who's still learning as well. So this lets them like use some of their picks to invest in the offense. And I think an interesting thing for them now is they can afford to like go heavy on some defensive spending for free agency, because that's something that
has anything happened?
Well, no. So I was writing some pieces yesterday for different defensive positions, and I was just thinking about it and looking, and they were like awful on both sides of the ball last year. They could not sack the quarterback. They could not stop the run. They could bring in countless options, because a lot of the defensive talent outside of the secondary has not been, well, and linebackers, but the defensive front has not been touched. And that's where you start with your rushing attack. And they could very easily turn this around extremely quickly, because I do think Justin Fields is the quarterback for the Bears. Like, I don't think that was a miss. They definitely hit on that.
Yeah, I think for me, like, in this, I'll start with the Bears side of things with this, is that this again just reaffirms that they have confidence in Justin Fields as their quarterback, right? There's people were trying to make arguments. I saw a lot of people, that some even that I kind of respect the opinion of, saying like they think they should just take Bryce Young and move on. Just don't think about it. He's a better player than Fields, all this stuff. And I'm like, that's not really even the conversation for me. It's the fact that you have a guy who's uniquely talented as a runner, but has all of the arm talent and really accuracy, especially looking back at his college tape, that you need to be a successful passer in the NFL as well. But they have not been able to surround him with either the offensive line talent or the receiving talent to really get a gauge on whether he can play or not from the pocket and do all that stuff in the NFL. I believe he can, because he showed it in college, but again, you have to give him the infrastructure to show that. Getting DJ Moore, building up hopefully the offense to the draft, since they focus on defense for agency, which again we'll talk about them in a second with that. But doing all of this will give them the opportunity, like you said, this year to determine, okay, if he can make a sizable leap as a passer, especially if we give him more freedom as a passer, if we throw the ball more significantly, what does he look like? And if he still struggles, if he's struggling in that department, then yeah, there's quarterbacks coming out next year that they're probably going to be able to look at and draft, because if he's bad, they're probably going to be bad too, and they're going to have the ammunition that they need to get up to a pick maybe as well. So I think it makes a ton of sense for the Bears. And for the Panthers, I'm wondering, and this is kind of the question for me, is can they convince maybe Houston, for example? Can they convince them that they're going to take whatever quarterback that Houston wants? And can they get just like a little bit extra back, move down one spot, and still get the one they actually want? Because I do think they want Stroud.
I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, I think Houston wants Young. So I think there's potential for that. It's risky, obviously, if they take the guy you want. But if it's true that they do like multiple quarterbacks, that's what we keep hearing. It might be worth it if you can get like a Texans second round pick this year. If you can convince them to give you that, that might be worth moving down the spot to let Houston go ahead and take whoever they want.
So I need to push back on that a little bit, and that has been a very popularly like speculated theory, and I think like even reported on by like local reporters of both sides. So like there's some juice to it. It doesn't add up to me because so when you're the Panthers, you have a guy in mind, right?
Yeah.
You have to be 100% convinced the Texans are not going to take that guy. In which case, why would the Texans want to trade up if they know they're not targeting the same person? Why would they spend an asset? Like if the trade makes sense for one of the sides, it makes zero sense for the other side. So I don't see how they ever come to terms on an agreement. The only way is if Carolina has identical grades and identical character evaluations on two of the quarterbacks and are willing to just take whichever one. But you don't make that move up to one if you don't want to lock in your guy.
That's the thing.
So
yeah, exactly.
You trade up to 3 if that's the case. You like and then you feel it out. So I think the fact that they traded up to 1 renders any trade between Houston and Carolina obsolete. Like it doesn't make sense to me. Why would you spend assets if you know that they're not going to take your guy anyways, and why would they trade down if that was anything other than the case? So that's
where it comes down to. Yeah,
the logic is really hard to wrap my head around, but it is being reported. It is something that might happen. So I don't understand it. I'll never understand it.
It's an intel thing. Like if Houston, if they can convince Houston of that, the problem is if they can convince them, that means Houston probably doesn't have all the information they should have, right? Like I think it's a battle of like who can fool who, and if someone can fool someone, then that's great. Then whoever makes out, then that's great. But I think, like you said, Houston would have to assume, right? Let's say Houston does have Young as their quarterback 1, which is what apparently I think the most commonly reported thing is Young as their QB1. I don't think the Panthers have,
based on the contract they dropped today. I would say that's what they're doing.
Yeah, but that's the point. Is like I think that if he's their quarterback 1. If the Panthers don't have him as QB1, which I don't think that they do, I think it is Stroud, and then maybe, and this would be the wild card, and this would be where you definitely want to make the move with Houston if you convince them. If it's Richardson, if they want to go the upside route, you definitely make that trade because there's no way Richardson's going at number 1. Like there's no way the Texans are taking him at number 1. I just don't believe that. So it's just going to be, can they convince Houston to want to come up? If that's the case, I think it makes a ton of sense for the Panthers. Obviously, though, than the Texans, you look at them and go, well, did you really think they're going to take Young? Because if you did, then you just call them on their bluff instead of like wasting a second-round pick. But I don't know. It's tough because, like you said, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But all the reports I keep hearing makes me think that there is some smoke to that. And I feel like ultimately, once we get close enough to the draft and enough information is available to people, it's probably going to just come down to the Panthers taking whoever they want, which is probably going to be Stroud if I had to guess. So,
yeah, I feel bad that I don't remember which podcast I heard this on. I like to credit those things when I hear other people's ideas and want to share them here. But somebody I was listening to said that the NFL historically puts a lot of pressure on whichever team has the first overall pick to keep it a secret.
Exactly.
To add intrigue and just mystery around the top of the draft. Don't let it be known months in advance. I think a lot of this is just them being like, yeah, we know who the hell we want, but the NFL is telling us to drum up some controversy. What is a meaningless that affects nothing? Like, oh, let's say we're in talks.
We're going to take Will Levis.
Yeah, like they're just. I think. Like that's the thing that makes the most sense to me about this. All of this noise we're hearing is, and I wish I knew who said that, but it's just that maybe the NFL is saying, "Hey, try to drum up some controversy around this. Don't just let it be known who you're going to take."
That's totally possible. I think it's totally possible. Now, granted, I hope that's not the case because that's lame. But I would get it. I would understand it because again, the NFL is an entertainment business. They want to keep things interesting. You hate whenever everyone knows who the first overall pick is. And I'm glad that we don't technically know. Like I still feel like it's going to be Stroud if the Panthers don't make any other moves, but it's not guaranteed. I mean, if they decide, we're going to take a swing with possible Cam Newton 2.0 with Anthony Richardson, that's I would understand it. I mean, again, it's a bigger risk, but it makes somewhat sense. So we'll see. Obviously, we're going to have to wait until the draft to find out. But do you want to move into, before we talk about free agency moves, I want to talk about trades that have happened as well, because there's been a few big ones for sure. Let's start with one that affects, technically both of you, but especially one of you in particular. Jalen Ramsey on the move from the Rams to the Dolphins for a third-round pick and Hunter Long, who I do know, but only know because of draft type and not because he's actually accomplished anything.
Hey, you only know because of the ATB chat, and we're
probably
incessant.
Yeah, but no. So that move, a lot I could say about it, but I want to kick it to Zach first because obviously this kind of affects him the most here.
Yeah. First of all, I think the biggest thing to point out is a third-round pick for Jalen Ramsey, and I don't understand how anybody else didn't bite on that. I know the contract's a bit bloated, but didn't the Rams take on a lot of a decent amount of that money as well?
I think maybe the first year of money.
Yeah,
I know they fully guaranteed his deal for the last 2 years of it.
Yeah.
When they trade for him, so they have to be paying that to some degree. So
to some degree, yeah. But yeah, no, that's really good for them. The secondary was an issue last year, especially because of injuries. There were some cuts that had to be made. So that it was just very surprising, and just the compensation just seems off. Because
but the Rams are in a tough spot. I think.
Well, I understand the Rams are in a tough spot, and and that's the thing, is that they're just offing everything at the moment. They cut Leonard Floyd. That everybody is reportedly on the table at the moment because it's dead. So, can you blame them? No, I guess they got their ring, and this is what they're gonna do. But I mean, this is my argument over that is again, I understand getting the championship is the biggest thing, but I also don't want to see my team be awful for the next 2-3 years because we're hamstrung and all that stuff. And they don't have the draft picks to do anything either.
Yeah, for a little while here, but yeah, I think with Ramsey,
it's exciting. And also with that, you also have the Dolphins picking up Tua's 5th-year option as well. Because I don't think we talked about that. I think there was discussion of what they were going to do there.
They did make that
decision, they've been making a lot of very interesting moves that, I mean, people talk about a window. I think they've done a very strategic thing of being able to keep their window open a bit longer than people think with the way that they're planning things out, but they're clearly going all in on the next 1 to 2 years right now to be hey, it's all or nothing.
I think, and I'll let Tony chime in on this one for a second. I don't want to spend too much time on each trade, but that's definitely the biggest one. I think the interesting thing with picking up Tua's option is I think it's strategic in the sense that they know that next year, right, barring him having another injury issue before the season even begins, they're betting on him getting through a season and being the player he was when he was healthy last year, right? Because if he's that player next year, especially with the reinforcements they've brought in since that happened, this team is a legitimate threat. I will say that. So I think that makes a ton of sense. The 5th-year option, though, I think is mostly because in the event that he does do that, right? Let's say he plays 15-plus games, right? So he plays most of the season, and he maybe misses a game or two for whatever reason. But he plays most of the year. He has dominant showing in this offense, all that stuff. They would have to pay him right away if that happens, instead of having the 5th-year option to fall back on. And granted, the 5th-year option is a guaranteed thing, so it is an issue if he can't play or get so banged up or he stops playing football. But at least it extends that window to re-sign him an extra year if that happens, so they don't have to come up with a plan right away to pay him. And if he's bad or hurt, then you have a 5th-year option that sucks, but it's money you can spend opposed to not having the ability to re-sign him when he blows up for you. So it makes a lot of sense to do that.
And that's the way that I viewed it the entire time. I believe that, look, missing 1 to 2 games is any player in the NFL.
Yeah, that's fine. It's
normal.
the
That's
5, 6,
fine. That's
7
great.
games.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're going into this season. If he misses more than like that 1 to 2, and obviously like depending on what it is, if it's 3, then like there can be exceptions made. But like once you get
about
like
why too, the concussion.
Why exactly? Why?
Like that. That's a big why too.
And you're going fully into this year saying, hey, if health is not at tip top, because that's what we need to give you a long term deal. After year 5, we're cutting ties. We're probably even going to look at something else going into next season. It's obvious that you're not this is not the direction. That's why I love the fact that they signed Mike White as backup quarterback as well. I called that. I called that. But yeah, they're making, like I said, they're making a lot of moves to say, hey, look, we believe in Tua, but he's got to be able to do it this year, next year, to show us that we're going to give him the long term. I think he can. I think there's some things that he can do to be a bit more aware and present in the moment in the pocket. But it'll be interesting to see. And it'll be interesting to see what the Dolphins continue to do to add, because they still have a decent amount of money left.
Anything you want to add there, Tony?
Yeah. So I guess I'll go reverse order. So talking about the Tua situation and bringing in Mike White and picking up the 5th-year option, I love it all. I think anything like you guys were saying, you want to extend the decision horizon on Tua. You want to gather as much information as possible before having to commit mega dollars to the kid. And so even though it's fully guaranteed, it extends your decision horizon, and that's important. And we've also seen
cheaper than it would be.
Yeah.
Exactly. Cheaper than it would be. And we've seen if things go south and you determine, okay, this isn't going to work out, the 5th-year option is tradable. We've seen it happen with Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. It's not appetizing, but it happens. Like, you can get a 5th or a 6th round pick back.
Outside of Baker, like that would be maybe comparable, but he's played far better than Darnold ever played.
Yeah.
You would actually be getting something
agree.
in that trade.
Maybe.
Yeah. And then, so I think Mike White is a good backup. I think we may have talked about Mike White. I don't know. But either way, good to have him there. I think we talked about the possibility of him being there. Good to have him there. Going to the Jalen Ramsey thing, incredible move for them. No brainer, very smart move, because they have the window, they have the cap space to do it. There is a very, like, I don't know, the public conception of the trade landscape and trade value when it comes to player trades is very skewed. We think superstar player, that should be a lot of 1st-round picks. No. Those are on like long-term cost-controlled deals in the player's prime. Ramsey coming off one of his worst seasons, which is still one of the best seasons in the NFL. It's just one of his personal worst seasons because he's used to playing as the best. He was due only $5 million of guaranteed money over the remaining 3 years of his deal in the way that it was with the Rams. He wanted a new contract, and he was upset with the direction the Rams were going. So there was something fractured in the relationship there. Then you look at what the Dolphins did after they traded for him. They fully guaranteed $39 million over the next 3 years. So that's what he wanted. That is something the Rams were unwilling to provide, because they're like, we actually don't really know what our window is. We're going to feel it out this year and then probably tear it all down if things don't go well. The Rams don't need the picks, though. They have 12 draft picks this upcoming draft. 12 draft picks. No, oh, wow. I think like 5 teams ever have made 12 draft picks in a single draft. They're going to be trading up to reduce their total number of draft picks. So this wasn't a like, oh, we need to get assets. This was a, oh, this player doesn't want to be here unless we fully guarantee all that money, and we're probably better off taking something, just anything. And the reason other NFL teams weren't in on it, one, Jalen Ramsey has to want to go there and want to have his contract fully guaranteed by whatever team he's going to be. He's going to have to want to go there for 3 years. Everybody knew Miami was the place he wanted to be, with the coach he wanted to be with. It's hard. Like, other teams would have to pay way more and have less, like, guarantees that he would want to be there. So I think the compensation aspect is jarring, and I wish that the Dolphins had spent more because that means that they would have had less assets to work with. But it does make sense when you look at the grand scheme of things. So Dolphins, absolutely no-brainer move, great move on their part. But I did want to add that context where like it wasn't they were just selling him for pennies. They sold him for what the market was willing to pay him, and the fact that he wanted to go to Miami and not the other teams only compounded that.
Zach seems concerned about something.
I'm very confused. All right, so listen to this right now. So I was trying to look up reasons as to why the Rams probably would not have given him the guaranteed money. It's because right now they only have $11 million in cap space.
That doesn't help. Yeah.
How are the Dolphins number one right now?
In what?
In total cap space.
Well, when you guarantee contracts, you can just those cap hits go to the
salary,
future, not the current.
Apparently, they only have 15 players signed.
That's probably not.
This is according to Spotrac.
I would say that
try over the cap.
That might not be accurately updated based on that's not right.
I'm just sitting here. I was like, this just doesn't.
Something's probably right. Up there, but I'll touch on this and then I'm going to go rapid fire with a couple of other trades here that happened that I think are notable. But and I'm going to kind of go off of your point, Tony. When we look at trades in the NFL, a lot of the time they do come in at less value than people assume, right? But it's because of the context, like you said. Every deal has more to it than just, I really like this player, and I'm willing to give you this much for him, and the other team's like, all right, sounds good. It's not that simple. With, like you said, the Ramsey situation, it is a combination of contract situation, of his particular team he wants to go to, because a team that isn't confident he's going to play for them for very long, is not going to give up anything for him. The Rams need to move off of, like, all those things combined together, and you get Hunter Long in a third round pick. And then, compared to, not to bring this up, Zach, although I'm sure you're probably mostly fine with it because you have a really high quality safety anyway. When Minka was traded to the Steelers, it was for a first round pick for a reason, though, because he was still in his rookie contract. He was a player that was, kind of still, he was obviously very talented, but things weren't really working out with Miami. They spent a first round pick on him. They weren't going to give him up for nothing. That's why I took a first round pick. Now, even as good as he's been, even if you might still not take a first round pick if he all of a sudden didn't want Pittsburgh anymore because he's just got a big contract. You have to trade that. It so much changes when it comes to guys like on the first contract versus second contract versus third contract. There's a lot of different things that happen there. And like you look at some of these other deals that we're going to talk about, and I want to get you guys' quick opinions on these ones. I want to start with the Darren Waller deal to the Giants. I have another thing I'll talk about after you guys, but I want to see what Tony, quick thoughts on that one.
I think it made sense for both sides. I think it sucks for the Raiders having to get rid of him, but getting a third-round pick in return for a 31-year-old tight end who hasn't played a lot of games recently, at a position that he's not the bulky tight end that has the frame that can take a bunch of hits. He's the wide receiver tight end, right? Yeah. It's a risk for the Giants. It's a risk worth taking because you need pass catchers, you need playmakers. Smart to bring him on for them, but also I think there's a very real scenario where we're looking at this in a year and a half and saying, God damn, the Raiders got a third out of that deal. Well done. Because he's on a contract, he's on a heavy contract, and he's 31 and has an injury history. That's that's what goes into the compensation. That's just another data point there.
What do you think, Zach?
I guess if we're keeping it quick, let this be a lesson to Josh McDaniels to maybe not talk about his players' business before they announce it.
Because I forgot about that part of it.
Well, that's the root of the issues in Oakland or in Oakland. In Las Vegas is that McDaniels announced him and Casey Plum's marriage before they had publicly announced it in a press conference, and they were not happy about that. And honestly, neither would I. Let this be a lesson. In press conference etiquette, I guess we keep it about the Raiders and only the Raiders.
Yeah, I will say I kind of on Tony's side of it makes sense for the Raiders for sure, just because again you want to try to kind of tear it down, which is the problem with that though, and we'll get to the Raiders and some things they did. I don't really know what they're trying to do, but that's beside the point. But a solid deal for them. And the Giants, again, you just paid Danny Jones more money than he probably is worth. got to make him worth the money. So get somebody he can throw it to. That's pretty much what the name of the game is for them. Totally fine. Brandon Cooks traded today, which again was been talked about for a while, and it finally happened. And of course, it's the Cowboys taking a shot at somebody. That's what they do, and that's actually the next two players. The next two players when we're talking about are both Cowboy trades. So with Cooks, fifth round pick and sixth round pick, I think is what the compensation came in at. Again, if you can give me Brandon Cooks for a fifth and sixth round pick, fine with that. But again, for the Texans, he didn't want to be there. That's a big part of it. He is a player that's had injury history. He's not old by any means, which is weird because he's been in the league for feels like forever, but he's not really an old player yet by any means. But again, Cowboys wanting to get some more firepower. They want to go for it still. Not sure how this is going to work out, but good deal, I think, for them for sure. And even the Texans getting something for a guy who didn't want to play for them. But what do you think with that one, Zach?
Yeah, actually flipped on the last one. I think this is better for the Cowboys than it is for the Texans because that's a steal for Brandon Cooks. Look, this is a player that has jumped around and wants a place to call home. And I think Dallas is more than willing to welcome him with open arms because he can complete a filthy trio of wide receivers between him, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup. And that sounds perfect. They have their deep threat. They had this is exactly what both the Cowboys and Brandon Cooks needed for their next step of going forward. And look, when we're talking about players in the NFL, there's nobody I feel bad more for than Brandon Cooks because literally he's just been tossed around the NFL at every franchise's whim. Oh, you know what? We don't want you. Oh, wait, you want to get traded? Guess what? You're going out and playing every week. We don't care. Yeah. But then finally somebody was like, hey, no, we'll let you go. And you don't want to be here. We get it. But yeah, no. It'll be interesting to see. I think that's a fantastic signing or a fantastic trade for Dallas to really make a difference in their offense.
Absolutely. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, you're going to notice a theme between how, I was just reading the list of players we're going to talk about, and I was like, oh, man, I'm going to be regurgitating a lot of my thoughts about these trades. But I think it made sense for Dallas to do. I think it was smart. They needed a speed guy. I will no longer mock them Jalen Hyatt in the first round. That was kind of my go-to press send. So they wanted that type of player, and they got that type of player. And there is a bit of an injury risk. He's getting older. He's a smaller guy. You never know when the wheels are going to fall out. The reason for the compensation. He's due $32 million over the next 2 years. And now the Texans were nice enough to eat $6 million of that. Imagine what the compensation would have been had they not eaten the $6 million. But it's still a hefty price they're going to have to pay. The $12 million this year, and then whatever the remainder on that is next year. Math is hard for me right now, but
or 14,
something like that, right?
Yeah.
But then the question becomes, does he want a new contract? Because usually when these things happen, they want a new contract. And that's where the fifth and the sixth, it's not great value for the player, but for the entire situation, it might make a lot of sense for the Texans, who are more of, looking at the next 2 to 3 plus years, whereas the Cowboys are looking at right now. I will say, I really wish this trade had gone through at the deadline like they were trying to make it happen, because Kellen Moore scheming up plays with Cooks in his offense is going to be a whole hell of a lot better than run the damn ball Mike McCarthy is going to be scheming up. It kind of sucks that they bring in the fast guy now, but I still think it's great for Dak to have the weapon. But I do think that the money remaining and the uncertainty of him wanting a new contract explains the compensation.
For sure, I think that's a big part of it. But yeah, I think Cooks definitely is a good fit for what they were looking for, obviously, to kind of complete that wide receiver trio. I am curious, do they roll with the tight end group they have? Do they try to bring Schultz back? He's kind of still out there right now. I'm not sure if he's.
I liked what the rookies did, but
I think
Schultz is still out there, like you said.
Ferguson was if I was looking at a comparison for the NFL for him as a Wisconsin fan, it was Schultz. So I think that's totally fine.
And one thing I would say about Brandon Cook's injury history is injury threat. I'm less worried about it with him on the Cowboys because I don't view him as number one option on the Cowboys. Whereas
he won't be.
Houston, he was the hey, no, you're gonna be out there every play. We're gonna have you running every single time. You're gonna go, hey, go route, go. Davis
that
Mills
is a really good point.
So like he can easily go down to being a second string, or like a wide receiver 2, sometimes even a wide receiver 3 if they want to work it that way. So like I think that will completely be perfect to benefit him for the longevity of his career. And then, like I said, he's been very vocal about wanting a home. If this works out well, I think both parties could easily find a deal that they could both agree on.
Yeah, and absolutely. So again, I think it's a solid deal, especially for the Cowboys side, especially if it works out. But Texans, you got to get rid of them, so you do what you got to do. But
yeah, and I mean, like it's not like what when did they get that? Was that for how did they get him? Did they sign him?
I think they traded like a third and a fifth to the Rams a few years back.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not like it looks like that was like a dump off. It's not really like we're sitting here and saying like all the Texans were like, oh, we needed Brandon Cooks to be competitive, because that was in the midst of like, was Deshaun Watson even with the team?
Yeah, Deshaun was there. Yeah, he played with Deshaun for a few great years.
Okay, yeah. Happened, so it's like it was like after that it was just like, all right, well, hey guys.
It is what it is. Again, if you're the Texans, you're just trying to get a guy that doesn't want to be there off your team while you're trying to build up.
Yeah, they got value out of somebody they had no leverage on, so that's a win.
I miss the Brandon Cook Saints days, because those were incredible.
Awesome.
The little like bow and arrow.
And then they made it illegal, and he couldn't do it because he got fined all the time.
Whatever. I called him at one point, my nickname for him, like especially like in that middle of like when he was going to the Pats and Rams days for him, like the 1,000-yard mercenary is what I called him.
Yep.
Yeah, just really is
1,000 yards and leave, like just literally it's crazy. But moving on, the last trade I want to talk about real quick here again is another Cowboys trade, giving up a 5th-round pick to the Colts for Stephon Gilmore, who still played very well last year. Now that he's in his 30s, I think he's a guy that can definitely help them. Obviously, the pass defense is a little suspect, even though Diggs, weirdly, I think was a better cover player this year, even though he didn't have the interception totals, but he wasn't as impactful overall, probably because he didn't take the ball away as much. He's a weird player. I think he's a good player overall.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but that's the thing about boom and bust secondary players, though, because like interception numbers are so flawed, because we want to see somebody get a lot of interceptions, but just because you get a lot of interceptions doesn't mean you're a good secondary player.
It doesn't mean you're a good cover player, especially.
You're a good cover player. You're in the right place at the right time. You like Shayne, think about Minkah Fitzpatrick. How many times have we seen plays where he just happens to be in that one spot in the right place?
He's always around the ball, Zach.
He's always around the ball.
Don't try to.
Like, there's deflections. There's crazy stuff. So like that's where last year, 2 years ago, when Diggs had these big numbers, everybody was like, "Oh yeah, this is awesome. This is awesome." But you heard a lot of people that were like, "Oh yeah, but." When he's actually forced to cover somebody and doesn't get the interception.
I think with him though too, Zach, you have to think about is it's not just that he was in the right place at the right time, it's that he literally played for interceptions. Like he could have covered somebody possibly, but chose to try to bait the quarterback into throwing him the ball. That could be the problem.
His year, but so his year 2 growth is that they were like, hey, we know that
cover guys more,
flashy, but you got to cover guys more because it's hurting us. So
he was legitimately a great NFL cornerback this past year, where he wasn't very good the year he had all the interceptions. So that's exactly what you guys are saying.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, the interception numbers can be very flawed because like unless you're like Xavier Howard a couple years ago, where like you are being a lockdown corner and also
they were like throwing him one-on-one balls, and he just was beating receivers. Like,
and he's just like
nope. Anyway.
So like unless you're like something like that, but like sometimes, like I said, those numbers can be extremely deceiving because they intercepted the ball a lot, but is that because they were trying to intercept the ball? And sometimes that's not a good thing.
Yeah, it doesn't always work out. But I think the Gilmore trade, I'm going to get you guys obviously your quick opinions on. I think it makes a lot of sense, like I said, because you have a guy on Diggs who he has developed into more of an actual cover player. Maybe he can be more of a playmaker, kind of balance those two things out. If he has another guy across from him that can handle some of the assignments that maybe would give him a little bit of trouble. So what do you think with this one, Tony?
Yeah, I think it was a smart move. I think when you are a team that perceives yourself as one of the few contenders in the league, which Dallas has every right to, they had an incredible year. The NFC is still weak. They have one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFC just based off of
no matter what. No matter your opinion of Dak, he's a top 3.
Yes, absolutely. So now is the time to be sending fifth or sixth round picks at players who are better than their teams, and that's what we're seeing with Brandon Cooks. That's what we're seeing with Stephon Gilmore. Yeah. Who knows how it works out, but it's good process, I think, and it's good for where they are in their life cycle right now. So smart trade, and then it does make you wonder, like, what are the Colts clearing all this money for? But I think they just could be clearing money too. Yeah, overall, I take a more Dallas focused approach to it. I think it's a smart move.
That was a midseason signing, right? Stephon last season?
I think it was later in the offseason, but it was an offseason move.
Yeah, he was on the team to start the year. Yeah.
That's still getting something for a player that you just brought on.
Yeah, for sure. Again, when you're a team that's in the Colts position,
they thought they were going to be competing. Yeah. They signed a guy that belongs on a competing team. They weren't competing, so he's now on another team, and they get a 5th round pick.
Exactly.
That's pretty much what it is. Yeah, but those are the major trades I wanted to talk about for sure, guys. And I want to jump into for the rest of the show talking about some of the big free agent moves. And I want to start by just kind of talking about a lot of the moves themselves, and then we can talk about some of the teams that I think really made not just the key moves or the big plays, but just what teams I'm curious about what their process is and what they're kind of trying to do. But just starting kind of from the top, we got the chance, I believe, to talk about Carr getting what he got from the Saints. That was kind of the before free agency big move. Jones got his extension. We talked about those two. But the kind of the first domino, in my opinion, that kind of kicked off what I want to start off talking about first was when Daron Payne was retained by Washington for 4 years, $90 million. Not saying that he's not a really good player or anything like that, but $90 million, so $22.5 per year at AAV. That's just a lot for really anybody that's not a quarterback, but especially a guy that wasn't going to be the top defensive tackle on the market, depending on
or even on his own team.
Exactly. Well, yeah, with John. But that's kind of the problem with it is that kind of, I think, is what kicked off what became a nuclear interior defensive line market. Like, unbelievable money was being thrown around for good players, but a lot of money. Like, you start Javon Hargrave, one of the first deals for agency that got talked about. 4 years, $84 million for a 30-year-old, a great 30-year-old, but a 30-year-old player coming off probably, if not his best season, one of his 2 best seasons, depending on which season you like the most with the Eagles. Definitely, unfortunately, a miss for the Steelers not bringing him back. It probably wouldn't have been the player he is with now with the Steelers. Just didn't use him that way. But the Niners get him for 4 years, $84 million. That defensive line is absolutely stacked. It is good because
it's stacked, but the ends do not have a lot of depth.
That's going to be something I have to figure out for sure. But again, that start, like, as far as starting four
out there,
that front 4 is a starting unit. Now, granted, you need the depth and you need to be able to rotate, but that it's hard to beat that front 4 as a starting unit right now with what they have going on there. So that was a big deal. Some of the other defensive lineman deals that I thought were just a little bit crazy. You have to go down to let me pull them up here. Draymond Jones gets a big deal with the Seahawks. Zach Allen gets a big deal to go to Denver to replace Draymond Jones. Well, before he even signed with the Seahawks, like, just a ton of money being thrown around. 3 years, $51.5 million for Draymond Jones. Good
Dalvin Tomlinson was a huge one.
Yeah, $57 million for the Browns over 4 years. Like, and that was people were like, that's kind of a bargain considering all the other deals.
And then
for year money.
And then conversely, Fletcher Cox took a hometown discount to come back.
$10 million, for the year. That was a discount too. That's the funny thing is he could have gotten more money. He said so.
David Onyemata signed with the Falcons at a very reasonable price because
$35 million over 3 years.
In this market he could have driven his price up a lot more. But I think there's a lot of familiarity with the Terry Fontenot and
the Saints defensive line got ravaged by free
agents.
Oh
yeah, the Saints lost all their defensive line.
Yeah, because Davenport ended up in Minnesota, right?
Vikings,
1 year deal in Minnesota. Yeah.
So again, like, just the defensive lineman market in general, like the edge/defensive tackle class just exploded. Like, that was where the majority of the money was being thrown around. It makes sense. That was kind of, I think, the strength of this class of free agents for sure. That and linebacker, who conversely, the linebacker market outside of Tremaine Edmonds kind of fell flat in terms of money. Like, I think the second highest paid per year guy in the market at linebacker ended up being, was it Okereke, I think, so far at $10 million.
Yeah, I think it was Bobby Okereke with the
4 years,
Giants.
$40 million. Yeah. And it's just, again, like, I think that's fair for where linebackers are being valued at now, especially off-ball linebackers. But Edmonds gets 4 years, $72 million. And granted, that's a kind of a front-loaded deal, and there's a way they can get out of it. But he was the best player, I think, overall in the market. But that's a lot. That's a big difference between $18 million a year and $10 million a year between the two top guys. And then so many of them signed for like $5.5, $6 million.
Well, yeah, and the Bears were astonishing because they were the first strike.
Yeah.
They signed T.J. Edwards to an incredibly reasonable deal, and we're like, wow, what a smart approach to linebacker by these Bears, right? And then they're like, but wait, there's more. Tremaine Edmonds. 4 years, $72 million. Like, I love Tremaine Edmonds. There are very few players in the NFL I love more than him. You know, as he was in Buffalo the first 5 years of his career. Wish he could have hung around. Incredibly excited to not be paying him $18 million a year.
Oh yeah,
he'll do great things in Chicago. I wish him the best, but no, thank you, not for me.
As a team that was in the Tremaine Edmonds sweepstakes and a Virginia Tech Hokies alum, there was nothing more that would have excited me to have Tremaine Edmonds come to my team, but not for that.
I really thought he was going to be a $14-ish million a year player, which would have been understandable, reasonable.
Well,
$18 million.
Okay,
that definitely shocked me.
Okay, the issue that we all have to sit here in. The man is 24 years old.
Oh,
yep. 5 NFL seasons under his belt, and he's 24.
Exactly.
That's where it is.
Awesome.
Coming off his best year, so like trajectory up. Very easy to see why the Bears convinced themselves to do it. We don't know. Yeah, and we know how Eberflus likes to use his. He's going to play Will in that scheme, but like he's going to get utilized well. He's going to get put in clean positions. The Bills asked a ton from him, so like if you didn't watch Bills games in and out, like you don't understand the impact this guy has because they asked him to do more than any other linebacker in the league, and he did it, and he was great at it. So like
so much too, it was great.
Yeah, I'm very happy for him. I'm happy he's not with us anymore, because of the price tag.
The Bears paid him a lot, but like these are one of these couple of these moves. I feel like they can easily convince quite a few like good like consistent, not even consistent, but dependable veterans for what they need to come in now and be like, oh no, they're actually kind of close. They're actually like, I mean, they're building a much better team now. They need to put some money into the secondary, obviously, and they'll get Eddie Jackson back this year. But like,
I look at it the opposite way. I think they invested the draft. So they got Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker early in last year's draft. Those have to hit, right? But what you need, their defensive line is still dog shit. It's terrible. Okay, it is awful. There's not a player on there. If you are investing that much in linebacker and ignoring the front, you have a bad perception of how football works. I am talking to you, Ryan Poles. You build from the trenches. You were a former O lineman. How do you not know to build through the trenches?
Hear me out. They should bring in Jadeveon Clowney.
They should. That's smart as hell.
With the specific issue they have, but
it won't help them with the passing issue, but it will absolutely help them with their rushing defense. Because look, you can say what you want about Jadeveon Clowney as a pass rusher and him being inconsistent, but the man has been a consistent rushing defender. So like, I wrote a piece that should be coming out soon over at PFN about Jadeveon Clowney, like best fits and stuff like that. And that's the thing is like, look. Everybody, when he came out, was like, oh, this man's going to get after the quarterback. And like, yeah, he's had a few good seasons doing that, and it's been a bit disappointing. But the man can defend against the run. And for a team that was letting up 130 rushing yards per game, you bring him in, and if the worst that he does is take that down like 10, 15 yards because he's getting tackles, that's still significant and helps Justin Fields. That's a win. And that helps Justin Fields possibly not have to be like Superman every single time he steps foot on the field, because how many games did we watch where all the Bears needed was one stop and they couldn't do it? The Dolphins game.
Yeah. No, I get it. I think that they still need to pick up some pieces in free agency on the defensive line. There's guys out there, Ashawn Robinson.
Exactly. They could bring back Robert Quinn. They
could if they wanted to. If he wants to go back there, probably not. But we'll see.
Well, actually, another piece I wrote. There was an interview before the Super Bowl where he was like, "Look, look, I get the whole hard feelings thing about the NFL, but for Robert Quinn to be that upset about the second franchise to do that to him, I would understand if it was the first. But the Rams already did it to him. The Rams already traded him away after he was like, oh, I'm going to be there long term. I feel like I'm going to be here long term. And he was not happy about that either. So when you heard him talk before the Super Bowl, he was like, hey, you know what? I didn't want it to happen, but I made it to the Super Bowl. So who am I to complain? Like, and I think he's kind of like come around on the idea that like, it might happen because the NFL is a business, and that's the thing is like when we were talking about Lamar earlier, like all of these, like we sit here and we're like, oh no, this makes so much sense. And as crazy as some of these owners are, at the end of the day, this is a business, and like when you start to get the personal aspect into it, it kind of like really starts to skew things.
Yeah,
But I definitely think that could be on the table. If they're like open to bringing him back to something that's a bit more like guaranteed.
yeah. No, I think the thing I want to do here as well, real quick, because there's a couple teams I want to focus on instead of just trying to go through all the free agents. But before we jump into talking about a couple, and I'll tell you guys real quick what they're going to be, but I want to get, what do you think, and I'll start with Tony here, what is the deal that surprised you the most in free agency, if you had to guess? Or if you had to think right now, what do you think is the most surprising deal that you saw?
Ooh. That's an incredibly tough question.
Yeah, it can be tough.
I do think it's got to be. I think so. Like where my brain is immediately jumping because you're watching the thought process happen. People absorb it, watch it. So the place my mind jumps immediately is it's got to be one of the deals that were cheaper than expected because there weren't a lot of like major ticket deals that shocked me and said like, wow, that's an overpay. It was just a lot of like, oh wow, I thought they could have made more. So I'm going to hit the recency bias. Actually, no. Okay. No, we're good. I found one. We're good. Okay. Juwan Taylor switching sides, 4 years, $20 million. Orlando Brown, who was the incumbent left tackle in Kansas City, got a lesser deal to go elsewhere, got offered a bigger deal by Kansas City the previous offseason, and they were like, you know what? We could have you at a cheaper cost, or we could pay this guy who just recently became really good, hasn't played left tackle since college 4 years ago. We could pay him, top of the market money to flip sides and be our left tackle. So that is the most surprising deal. I was gonna go the value route. I was gonna say Isaac Seumalo only taking 3 years, $23 million with the Steelers, which is incredible contract value. Thought he'd get more, but no. We're gonna focus in on how the hell do you justify that when you had a guy you knew could play left tackle at a cheaper cost.
I'll comment on that, but I want to get Zach's one here first before we move on.
So mine is a pair, and one of them is from today because it's like a domino thing. But the Mike McGlinchey.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Massive deal. And rightfully so. I don't know. I haven't really. I didn't know.
No,
okay.
I don't like it, but I wasn't surprised by it.
Okay. So that's what I thought. A lot of money for him, which then you turn around today and see the Laramie Tunsil deal, which makes him the newest highly paid offensive lineman. We have a new reset for offensive linemen, which is already a very, very bereft like position, because that's one thing I talk to a lot of people about when they ask me about like USFL and XFL stuff, and they're like, oh well, what's with the offensive line play? What's so bad? I'm like, well, there's quite a few NFL teams that don't have an offensive line. It's not like it's out there and
it's
just available for the taking.
Available talent and not another issue.
So when you have guys like McGlinchey getting deals
almost
like
this, $20 million is about
it's like
17 plus million. Yeah,
it's like, all right. I mean, I understand like he might be all right, but that much money, I don't think that many other teams would pay him that. So very interesting move, and like I said, it just kind of resets a lot of other things because like another player I was hoping the Dolphins would be able to convince and let the King return home, because Laramie Tunsil's done so much for the Dolphins organization. But yeah, no, not for that. Not for that.
And I will say, I do want to touch on the Laramie Tunsil thing. I'm willing to wait a little bit, but I want to throw that out there. Don't let us log off before I talk about him.
Go ahead, throw that out there before I get to mine. Tony, go ahead.
All right. So Laramie Tunsil announced today that he signed a 3-year contract extension with the Houston Texans, $75 million, 50 guaranteed. So essentially the first 2 years fully guaranteed. It's 3 years, $25 million. $60 million in total guarantees, including injury guarantees and whatnot. Just a truly masterclass of a deal. Tunsil was his own agent, which is relevant. Why? Because Lamar Jackson is his own agent and is playing it the exact opposite way.
Him a
So
call.
I want to bring this tweet, and I'm just going to read it verbatim because there's really nothing I can say better than this. But Mitchell Schwartz, all-pro former right tackle of the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl winner, really, really knowledgeable guy when it comes to the NFL offensive line play and contracts. He was very involved with the Players Association in his time in the league. I think he's still involved with them. He's a very intelligible source on how players should approach contract structures. So he said, and he quote tweeted the contract announcement. He said, "This is how you do it, players. Sign 3-year deals and don't push for fully guaranteed contracts. Drive up the average annual value. Keep the contract short and cash in 2 to 3 years later as the market keeps jumping. He'll be ready for another deal when he's 30 to 31. His 4th deal, not his 3rd. Awesome." So what he is proposing here is something that Lamar Jackson needs to take some notes on. If you want long-term, you're not going to get fully guaranteed. If you want to bet on yourself, you need to do these. And really, even if you want the long-term contract guarantees or whatever, you need to just do these 3-year deals because a team is willing to basically fully guarantee a 3-year deal. Like, they're not going to really, but 60 million of 75 million is ending up fully guaranteed against injuries, against everything. So you are going to get top of the market money for 3 years. You are going to then negotiate your next contract with tons of leverage when the cap has spiked even more. And you will be able to get another market-setting contract in your prime. So if you want to really make the most money you can in the NFL, this is the approach. This is the smart way to do it. People say it's risky. No, because $60 million, if Laramie Tunsil tears his ACL year 1 and does not play again, he still makes $60 million. This is the way to approach it, and this is where Lamar Jackson is failing. He's not willing to go on that short term, and this is something he needs to take notes from. Somebody who negotiated a contract himself, somebody who has continuously made the most out of his career. Laramie Tunsil he should just write the book for incoming NFL players on how to market yourself. Because let's not forget where Laramie Tunsil is coming from. He was the first overall pick. Until day of the draft, a picture comes out of him in a gas mask bong, which should have only increased his value. But, in my opinion, but that's, right? That's but no, it knocked him down from 1 to 14. His contract got cut in half because that's the jump from 1st overall to 14th overall. Your contract gets cut in half plus a little bit. And now he's made over $120 million in his career. He's now twice been the highest paid left or tackle in NFL history. This is a masterclass, and this is what players should look to. Fully guaranteed isn't the model. This is the model. This is how you maximize your earning potential in the NFL.
That is why at some point the king must return home. He must return home because he not only did he help himself, like we would not have Tua if it were not for Laramie Tunsil.
That's true. Yeah, but him and Kirk need to get together and write a book because Kirk's done it with quarterback deals and Tunsil's done it with the left tackle deals. But so real quick, I want to comment on the two.
Chad Henne and him need to write a book.
Yeah, Chad Henne, too. No, so with yours, Tony, I struggle with it because I think Orlando Brown Jr. is a bad left tackle. I legitimately bad pass blocking left tackle. I do not think he is a good left tackle overall. He's a great run defender, run blocker, left tackle. He's going to be a great run defender or run blocker no matter where he's at on the line. But as a pass blocker, he really got saved a lot by Patrick Mahomes being Patrick Mahomes. He got beat a lot.
Poor Joe Burrow.
He got beat a lot.
Or did Patrick Mahomes make his job harder?
No, he got his ass beat consistently off the edge for them the entire time he was there. I watched enough of it. I've seen it happen a lot. He got a lot of early losses at left tackle, which is why if he played right tackle whenever he was when he played right tackle with the Ravens, he was a more than quality pass blocker because it just wasn't as much of an issue for teams, and he just felt more comfortable. It felt like at that spot as a pass blocker. It's what he played in college. A lot of it felt better. At left tackle, $16 million a year for him is still not a terrible contract because that's what he got from the Bengals. But I think Jawan Taylor is a better pass blocker. I think no matter what position he's playing than Atlanta Bridge. I just think that's the case. Now I still wouldn't have paid him $20 million a year. It was an overpay a little bit because of the fact you're betting on him getting to that point where he's that good to get $20 million a year. but he's already a better pass blocker than Leonard Brown Jr. He is. Like, you cannot convince me otherwise. He's a better pass protector, and if that's what they wanted, if that's what they care about, again, it's more than money than they should have had to pay, but I understand switching those two out, even if you have to move Taylor over to left tackle. But I also totally, because of the contract value, I get why you're concerned about it, because it could definitely not work out. It's totally possible.
Yeah, because I mean, you always hear NFL players say like, "Oh yeah, switching sides of the line is hard. Like wiping with the other hand." It is not hard. Intuitive. It does not feel right. And it is hard to do.
Brown Jr. though struggle at left tackle compared to right tackle because he wants to play left tackle more than he wants to be a good NFL player. It's really weird. Like, he shouldn't be a left tackle.
I disagree on your valuation of Orlando Brown. I think he is a perfectly adequate, if not above average, left tackle.
If you count run blocking and pass blocking, I'll give you that. As a pass blocker, I would take probably 20 guys over him right now as a pass blocker. So it's tough. It's tough, but I
think it is the best left tackle that Joe Burrow has played with.
Oh, that's more, I mean,
is that a high bar?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a bar.
It's a bar.
It's a bar.
I go to a lot of bars. It's not necessarily high ones.
As far as yours, Zach, though, man, I get that too. Because eventually, again, that's another guy who's not a pass blocker. He's a really good run blocker. He's probably going to get beat a lot in pass protection. He has been his whole career. He's going to move. If they want to go into like the whole like we're going to pound the rock a ton because Russ Wilson isn't good anymore, then it might work out. Yeah, it might work out because he's going to be able to move people in the run game. But I don't know about pass blocking either, so I get that. For me, the most surprising thing, and not because it was necessarily like bad on either side, but it was just I didn't expect it. And there was a reason why I didn't expect it, because it was kind of basically said it was going to happen. The Eagles retaining both of their corners. Bradbury at 3 years, $38 million, which I know he's getting a little bit older, but that's totally reasonable value for a guy.
I thought that was a great deal for sure.
And then Darius Slay comes back on a new. Actually, I haven't gotten I don't know if they have the contract details all figured out with that yet or not. But he's going to be coming back as well. They keep their top two corners. Opens up the opportunity to maybe not have to go DB at 10, which is kind of what I had them doing for a long time. Still could, because they're still older at that position.
I think that's still what they do, but like they took the pressure off, right?
Exactly.
They're no longer drafting for need. You're drafting for 2 to 3 years.
If somebody they really like better than the DBs is there, now they can actually afford to take them, opposed to just saying, well, we still have to take a DB. So that's really nice. That I thought was very surprising. But I want to talk about, you said, Tony, real quick, too, with the 3-year deal situation. That's really smart, and I'm going to bring it up again later when we finish up. But real quick, before we go into the last two things we really want to talk about, which is the two quarterbacks are still kind of out there figuring stuff out. We're not sure what's going on with them yet. I want to touch on two teams in particular in free agency. We already talked a lot about what the Bears did. I like what they did. I want to talk about the Broncos, because we just talked about Mike Lynch as well, if that's interesting. And I want to talk about another team in that division, the Raiders, because I think for both of those teams, I'm a little bit unsure of what they're actually trying to accomplish. So I want to start with the Raiders, because they signed in this guy we haven't talked about yet, Jimmy Garoppolo, to, again, for a quarterback deal, it's not really a problem of the money. 3 years, $67.5 million. It's still a lot of money, obviously, but for quarterback, that's half as much as you paid, almost about half as much as Daniel Jones is going to get paid and some of these other guys are going to get paid. But I don't get the direction. Because, again, in my opinion, now I understand Josh McDaniels doesn't have any real job security probably right now, other than the fact the owner might not be able to afford to hire another coach, which that's still funny, but whatever.
That's fantastic job security.
Exactly. That's like the funniest part of this whole thing, is that's probably why maybe you could do this. If I was McDaniels, I would go to Davis and be like, listen, we should be really bad this year. Like, as bad as we possibly can, because
no.
And the reason I say that is because
no.
What? Okay, Zach, I'll stop. I want to see what do you think with this one?
Because if we got investigated for trying to do tank for Tua, I'm not letting the Raiders do that.
Okay, well, when I say do that, don't sign a middling quarterback to a $22 million deal. That's what I'm talking. Like, don't do that. Like, you should have kept Stidham. I know he went to the Broncos. Like, pay him like a little bit more than you probably should have, just because he was okay for that one game. Let him play out the string. Draft defense, hit that hard, try to build up a defense that can actually support an offense that you want to have. Maybe even look into, if a team's willing to overpay for it, maybe you move in Adams, because is he going to be valuable to you while you're being bad or trying to like build this up? Whatever you have to do. But don't try to be mid, because that's what the Raiders are trying to do. They trade Darren Waller, but then they sign Jacoby Myers for some reason, which is not that I don't like Jacoby Myers, but like, is he going to move the needle much for you? because he's already a slot receiver mostly, and you have Renfro there. You sign Jimmy Garoppolo. Don't focus on defense at all so far, which is what their biggest issue is. I just don't know what the direction is, and I'm really confused by the entire thing. And I want to I know, Zach, you talked about the tanking thing, but like that aside, what do you guys make of what they're trying to really do here? Because it's confusing me a lot. I'll start with Tony here.
I am a fan of the process, actually.
Oh, geez, okay.
And I see the vision.
I want to know what the vision is because I'm not seeing it. Tony.
So
tell me, please. I want to see it.
The vision, and this is where this isn't how I would build a team, but if I look at the current state of the Raiders and what their options are, I think it makes sense, especially when you consider who their coach and GM are. They're trying the Patriot way a little bit, where their whole thing is we are going to get competent across the board, and we are going to try to just not make mistakes ourselves and capitalize on other teams' mistakes. And that's probably a flawed belief system in today's NFL, especially in the division they're in. But there's proof of concept in the NFL, and that is what this coaching staff, what this GM know, and it's not impossible to make work. You are going to be relevant. You are going to be in that 7 to 9 win range, and maybe you steal a couple surprise ones. The key thing is you were paying Derek Carr just about $40 million to not compete, right? Like he was good enough, but you weren't really doing much. He wasn't moving the needle. You still had to build a juggernaut around him if you wanted to be really good. Jimmy Garoppolo is another quarterback who's not going to move the needle. You need to build a juggernaut around if you want to do things. But he comes at 60% of the price of Derek Carr. So you are swapping out what you see as, maybe a 10% difference in play for a 30%, 40% difference in contract. So you now have way more flexibility. Not to mention, 3 years, whatever million, it's a 1 year, $25 million deal. They can get out with nothing hurting them after 1 year. So if the board falls your way and Will Levis falls to you at 7, you can take him and sell everybody on the future. Or you're no longer desperate at the time of the draft. You have something in place where next year you can look at your roster and be like, we can get 7 to 9 wins, and maybe we get lucky and get a couple more. Also, you can still go big for the future, or you can sit tight and try to trade up in next year's draft. You have not mortgaged the future. You expect to be competitive today, and you have a path to being very competitive tomorrow. And that's as far as where they were in their life cycle and everything, I think that's probably the best you could have hoped for out of this offseason. So I see the vision. I like the vision. I think certain teams are still going to have to try to go for the mid-tier, right? You're not going to have 5 teams gunning for it all and the other 27 sucking. You're going to have some teams fighting for that middle ground. And I don't like to chase mediocrity, but I think that they are not spending to chase mediocrity. They are just chasing mediocrity with assets in the future. And that's the way you're going to do it if you're going to do that.
So I think it comes down to me, I just don't agree with it, I guess, is the whole thing. Is I think for a team like them, I would not be chasing mediocrity. I would not be chasing competitiveness because you're not going to actually be competitive, in my opinion. They did not address anything defensively, which is still their biggest issue. Garoppolo keeps them at a level offensively where, it'll make Adams useful because he can actually take advantage of him to a certain degree. You don't have to worry about some random guy in there for a year. But if I'm the Raiders, and especially because of the division that they play in and the conference that they play in at this point, my goal at this point would be how can I get one of the 2 quarterbacks next year? That's because if you don't do that, Will Levis is not going to beat Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to beat Justin Herbert. He's not going to do that. He might beat Russell Wilson because Russell Wilson is older and bad for some reason, but that's beside the point. You're not trying to beat Russell Wilson.
In a scheme that doesn't fit him.
Yeah, you're not trying to beat Russell Wilson. You're trying to beat possibly Herbert if they can get stuff figured out around him, and you're definitely trying to beat Patrick Mahomes. I don't think that's going to be Will Levis. I don't think it's going to be obviously Jimmy Garoppolo. I think in their specific circumstance, although you are right, teams do have to there has to be teams that reach for that 7 to 9 win range. It's what they're trying to accomplish sometimes. I don't think it would make sense for the Raiders to be one of those teams because they're never going to win with this route. They're not going to be able to win within that division and get past those guys using this methodology. It might get them, like you said, the 7 to 9 win range. You'll keep them relevant. But how long will you have to do that before you can make a big move to try to get above them? And being 7-9 or 7-10, 8-9, the cost to go up and get a guy that might be able to compete with the Mahomes or at least somewhat with him, you're going to mortgage more of your future assets when you could just be bad for a year or two and try to take advantage of all those high picks.
So
yeah, but this is Las Vegas, maybe.
So that does matter. You have a cash poor owner who needs to fill the seats, right? They need that cash flow so that they can be aggressive when they're ready to be aggressive. But I think most importantly is just that there are teams that are going to be bad on their own without any attempts to be bad. They are going to be bad enough to get that first, second overall pick on their own. If you have to tear down a middle of the pack roster to try to be bad enough to get one of those picks, and then you can't really guarantee you're going to be bad enough to get one of those picks, you're not doing anything to help your team, right? Because like right now, there's nothing prohibiting them from, if they finish middle of the pack next year, just trading the farm for one of the quarterbacks if they believe in them. We don't know that those quarterbacks are going to be worth that. Quarterbacks look a lot better a year in advance than they do come draft time. That always happens. Plus, you would have to actively try to get bad. You would have to take on dead money. You would have to trade players away for less value than they carry. You would have to piss off a lot of the NFL to try to get bad enough to guarantee one of those two picks. And then you need to really clean out all 54 players on your roster if you do that, because you just stink at that point. You have it on you. So I think if you are already bad enough, you shouldn't be making moves like this to try to be middle of the pack. But if you are middle of the pack, you should try to stay there without mortgaging your future and have a little bit of upside. And I think that's what they've done, because they would have really had to strip some things down and do some ugly stuff if they wanted a chance at being bad enough. And that's just a chance. And then multiply that by the chance that the quarterbacks aren't even looking good next year. Staying alive is not a bad move, especially because you never know. Lamar might become available at some point. Like, you want a roster in place that he'd be happy to come to. Like, I think they're walking the line of like keeping all options on the table. And from where they started, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's just an agree to disagree thing from a philosophy standpoint with team building. Especially, again, I think the thing that's pushing me in that direction more than anything is the fact that they have zero chance of competing against Patrick Mahomes with that strategy. They will never be that way. And that's what the goal is in that division. You have to. That's what the
goal is in that division, but I mean, that's what the goal is in that conference. There's a lot of teams that have to do that. So, I mean, if we're going to hold the Raiders to that, we have to hold like the Texans to that and the Titans to that. They're not going to beat Patrick Mahomes with Ryan Tannehill. Like, there's so many other teams that you could apply that exact same lens to. And it's just like, yeah, well, it's Patrick Mahomes. It's the best quarterback in the league. That's almost every team has to do that. So
I think the Texans have been doing that there. They've been bad. They've been trying to get all these assets. Like, that's the only way they're going to ever try to get to that point. And the Raiders, obviously, they might not be bad enough on their own. They might have to do things to get to that point where they could be top 5, top 3 pick. But they were already the 7th pick this year.
Well, okay. How about our favorite person to kick while they're down? I mean, the Saints. I mean, I don't
like what the Saints are doing either, so I can't.
Yeah, but somehow they continue to roll it along, because right now, according to Over the Cap, they have like some of the most cap space in the league right now, which is insane.
Also, but if you look at all of their base salaries, it is the funniest thing. It is all vet minimums. It is so funny.
I know, but again, we talk about this, and then like every year, everyone's like, "Oh, they're gonna have to take it," and then they don't.
Okay, are we saying that they didn't take it this offseason? We were just talking about how their entire defensive line is playing elsewhere, and they are still paying them. They took it. That is the result.
You're right. But you weren't going to be able to pay every single one of them. Like,
but you are paying Shy Tuttle $12 million to play for the Atlanta Falcons.
Well, I think
that's happening.
The biggest loss, and I don't know how they had to have figured some out, was Davenport, because they invested too much to get Davenport that you needed to keep Davenport. That was the biggest loss this offseason, because like he was actually starting to come around and be a viable weapon alongside Cameron Jordan. That was the biggest mistake for them, is somehow they needed to figure out how to keep him. Which
it is what it is. But
it was only 10 million too. I mean, that's not unreasonable.
no, but yeah, I think again, like that's just kind of my philosophy with it. But I do understand. Like, I'm not going to pretend like I don't understand what you guys are saying. It's just again, it wouldn't be how I'd be handling it. And then
I guess
yeah.
the Raiders are in a much better spot than the Saints are, to where like you can actually see.
Yeah, see,
the
that's
Saints are gonna have negative $200 million.
But you can see how they can get out though, and I mean that's what McDaniels and Davis are sitting there in the front office are sitting there like, oh well, I mean it's not like we're like completely in the mud. Like no, there is a way. We just have to figure it out.
Yeah, so like I just because I feel like people can listen to this and maybe think I'm contradicting myself because I am very critical of the Saints approach and praising the Raiders approach, and they are both chasing mediocrity. The difference is if the Saints did not intervene, they would have bottomed out and reset, and that is ideal. But they did intervene. They mortgaged the future to chase mediocrity. The Raiders, they didn't have to intervene to remain in their mediocrity stage. They just had to make sure they didn't mortgage the future, and that's what they accomplished. So that's, you got to look at where they're starting from, because I hate what the Saints have done to mortgage the future to chase mediocrity. I love what the Raiders have done to stay relevant without doing anything to hurt their long-term future.
Right. So the other team I want to talk about is the Broncos a little bit, because they just absolutely unloaded on the first day of free agency. You're talking about $87.5 million Michael Dunshee, $52 million to a good player, but not probably the best guard on the market, Ben Powers for the Ravens. They added Zach Allen for less money than Draymond Jones, but I think Draymond Jones is a better player than Zach Allen. So again, it's kind of a crapshoot there. It's like pick your poison. Just a lot of money, almost like I think $200 million in contracts were given out by the Broncos in total value over the first 2 days of free agency. And you can tell that Sean Payton is trying to put his stamp on this team, and it's very clear to me that he's going to try to address the offense by basically being like, we're going to run the football 500 times. It's kind of what it feels like he's doing. And I don't blame him for that, especially because once Javonte Williams comes back, he's going to be obviously hopefully really good. They signed some IGP Ryan as well to be that kind of workhorse type of player, probably because he can handle that load at his size. I think that the only thing I have questions about is does this all make does this have any chance of working? I don't know.
When Russ is gone.
Well, that's my problem. Is do they have any possibility of salvaging even somewhat that Russell Wilson deal? Because I just don't think it's likely, but I think the only way to do it is to basically mitigate Wilson's impact, which that's the problem, is you're mitigating the impact of your $200 and some million quarterback, and it's a tough pill to swallow, but I guess they're doing it. So I got to give them credit for that.
I think the way you worded it there is perfect, because their path to success under the current structure is to go very run heavy, go back to the early rookie year deal Russell Wilson teams where you build a rock star defense, which they have the players in place for, or at least some of the players in place for, and then you run the shit out of the ball, and you rely on the play action deep balls and stuff, and you don't let Russ cook. And that's what they're building. That's what they're building. They're going for the zone heavy run scheme with the play action off of it. And I think if what Russ is now, if we see him successful again, and I mean we just saw the worst. It shouldn't get much worse. It probably has a little bit of positive regression coming. I think this is the direction you should take it. Do I think it works? No, but I understand the thought process, and I do think gearing up for the post Russ, in a couple of years, they'll be able to get out, and I think maybe that's what they're really attacking, but they're just maybe this will work too. Yeah,
I think, and I'll let you chime in, Zach, but I think that's the question is, I think if you're just looking at it from, can they compete with Russell Wilson now? I think the answer to that is no. Can they make it look better, and can they navigate that process while he's on his contract until they can get out of it? I think it makes it easier. But again, I think for Sean Payton, obviously he took some time off and he came back. He came back for this though. Is this what he's trying to do? That's what I think is curious about it. Is obviously I think Sean Payton's a great coach, but honestly more so less on the Broncos negative side, because I think it was great to get him. Is this way Sean Payton wants to come back to the NFL after taking a break? Because Like, I want to, yeah.
I disagree with you because I do think that they I mean exactly what Tony says. If they can build that, they can win. They have the players that they can win and be fine. Their defense. I mean, look, what was the running joke from last year? You take
they scored more than 18 points.
You take the unders on Denver games because even against Kansas City, they were stopping Kansas City. They have a defense. The offense just didn't work. And again, obviously there were some holes in with what Russell Wilson was doing, but Nathaniel Hackett was in so over his head that like it was clear that
it was pretty rough to watch.
Yeah. Because I mean, it wasn't even just with him. I mean, you had other aspects of the offense that were just like, what are you guys doing?
There's a lot of deep balls, which for Russ is usually good, but he was bad.
Yeah,
which is the weird thing.
So I think it can work. And the problem is, it will work if you ask Russ and he agrees to do something that he hasn't been doing for a while. And if he agrees, then yeah, then they'll be fine. They can win. But it's just, will he be willing to take that back seat again and like rely on other areas and not be the focal point?
If he isn't willing, guess who's gonna? There's someone gonna come and play for him. I don't think
Jarrett Stidham got some money.
But I think that's why some of the early signs of how the relationship between Wilson and Peyton has gone have been good. And he might be more than willing to be like, all right, look, I fully understand that. Like, yeah, no, we can't.
I was kind of doo-doo last
because it's also worth noting that we've watched this man have like the most, what I would say, unnecessary character assassination of the last year.
Yeah, he's a little weird, but that's everyone's a little weird.
He's a little corny, but he's not a bad guy. He's like the exact opposite of being a bad guy. So like that, yeah. He's a strong personality in football and in a front office and locker room, but Sean Payton, I feel like, is probably a bit better than Pete Carroll to maybe diffuse that.
Yeah, Pete just kind of fed into it, I think. He kind of let him have it for a while.
He's still fading into it. They're still dropping like leaks and rumors of stuff that went on. They're like, oh, hey, yeah, you see what Russ did to us? And I'm just like, who cares? He's gone. You got your point off.
You have a better quarterback somehow randomly, which is great, but whatever. Did you want to add anything, Tony, before we finish up?
Yeah, I just piggybacking off of that point. I don't think there's a quarterback in the league who cares more about his public perception than Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
that man, he searches his name on Twitter every morning. That's all he cares about. He wants people to like him, and he's a little bit of a weird dude, but he's a good dude, and he wants people to like him. So that is going to outweigh. Yeah, he probably wishes that he could be the reason his team is winning in this all out aerial attack and everything. But if you can sell him on the idea of, hey, if we actually restrict your influence on the offense and actually run it this way, you'll win again. And people will lay off you. He'll probably sign right up for that and say, okay, fine. I'd rather people like me than people think I'm the best.
And at the beginning when I was like, oh, yeah, no, Russell Wilson and Sean Payton, the more I've looked at it, I'm like, this is going to be weird. But if you can get him to sign on to that idea, then it's not necessarily like a bad thing. But that's the thing.
I don't think so.
We haven't seen him willingly sign on, just being like, hey, I'm gonna take the back seat the past few seasons, so that's where the concern comes in. So, I think Sean Payton is probably somebody who's high enough, who he could probably respect enough, especially if he's talked to Drew Brees, if he's had these meetings and stuff like that. Like, this is a little different. This is a little different than Pete Carroll, because it's not like Pete Carroll was the most gracious off the jump. So,
yeah. So, but last thing we want to talk about, we've had a long show, but I want to definitely finish it up here. The quarterback situation with Lamar Jackson, we touched on a little bit already, and Aaron Rodgers. So I'm just going to let you guys kind of know where we're at with it right now. You guys already know, I'm sure, but any of you guys watching. Aaron Rodgers basically said he's going to play for the New York Jets. That's his intention. It's just going to be up to the Packers and Jets to kind of figure out what that's going to look like. The last thing I heard is that the Jets are comfortable waiting and being patient about it because they think it's going to work out in the end, and they're going to kind of leave the pressure on the Packers a little bit, which ultimately, I don't think this matters a whole lot. It's going to end up getting done. It's just going to be what does it cost and what do they have to give up. I'm assuming at this point it's probably going to be a second or third round pick this year and probably a late round pick next year. It's kind of what I'm thinking it's going to end up being.
You don't think any players are involved?
I maybe Elijah Moore instead of a late round pick. That would make some sense for the Packers, and not so much for the Jets, in my opinion. Just I like Elijah Moore, but if they don't view him that way, I think it'd be a good pickup for the Packers. But in general, I think it's going to be something along those lines of like a day 2 pick and a late pick next year, or a day 2 pick and like a player like you mentioned, Zach. So that's what I think it's going to end up being. I don't think it's going to be the 13th pick. I think that ship is pretty much sailed, which I think is smart because as much as Rodgers I still think can be a very good player, and he still was a good player last year, he's not probably an MVP anymore, and he's 39 years old or however old he is now. Like, it's just not a long-term thing, so you don't want to give up a premium asset like that. But, and this is going to get into the Lamar situation, I'm going to propose something to each of you, and I'm curious what your thoughts are going to be on it, because I know what direction I would go with this situation. Obviously, I'm the one presenting it, so obviously I know. But I'm going to give you 2 scenarios for the Jets. The one that's pretty much going to happen, and the one that I think could also be something that they could have looked into doing as well. Would you rather do the Rodgers deal as it apparently is going to be done, which again is going to be giving up a few assets but not a lot, but paying a guy a lot of money because the Packers are going to have to take on some of that, but you're still going to be responsible for some of that contract as well, for a 39-year-old quarterback who didn't look the best last year compared to what you're used to from him, for a chance to go ahead and compete for the next year and maybe 2 years, because I think maximum you're getting 2 years of actual competitive play. Or, this kind of goes back to what Tony said earlier, this is something I think would be very smart of them to try to do. Do you go ahead and you call up Lamar Jackson and you tell him, listen, we know the contract situation has been tough for you. We know you're looking for this and that. If we gave you a 3-year, $145 million deal, maybe even fully guaranteed, do the Kirk Cousins thing where it's 3 years but it's fully guaranteed for a quarterback, we'll give you that contract. You'll come in. You'll have all the weapons we've accumulated. We have picks. We can get guys for you, do all this stuff. Let's go run it for the next 3 years, and we'll see what happens from there. Would you rather do that, or would you rather do the proposed Aaron Rodgers deal as it stands right now? I'm going to go to Zach first here.
I in a heartbeat, I would much rather have Lamar Jackson in my building than Aaron Rodgers from an added, not even like talking about football, from an attitude base alone, because like what happens if you bring in Aaron Rodgers and he doesn't vibe with the receivers that you have, and he's like, oh yeah, no, they're not doing what I want them to do, they're not good, because that was my biggest complaint. Like, aside from their offensive struggles, my biggest issue last year with the Packers was that, look, I understand that you don't have a veteran receiving core anymore, but don't be the jerk who's just sitting there and being like, yo, these guys suck. Yo, these guys are awful. Because then what reason does that have to come next week and be like, oh, I should show up. Oh, wait, no, I suck. I'm awful. My quarterback doesn't want to play, doesn't want to throw to me. So like, that's always been my problem. And just with how, like, and I said the same thing about Brady, and I think they're both very, very well. Brady retired. I think Aaron Rodgers is very close behind him. They look like they could not have been interested whatsoever to be out there every week last year. Whether or not that was because they were losing, but I don't think, that's such a like entitled position to take, be like, oh, the first time in my career I've hit a rough spot, I'm losing some games, and now I'm going to be a little whiny boy. So like, that's where with Lamar, again, it's will he take that deal? And if he's willing to take that deal, then yeah, and in a heartbeat. Yeah. And I think I would do that.
What do you think, Tony?
Yeah. So you guys said the question is, will he take that deal? That question doesn't matter. That question does not matter at all. The question that matters is, will the Ravens match any deal that another owner is willing to put out there? And the answer is yes. The reason the Ravens are doing this is because they're done. They're annoyed negotiating with Lamar. They want some other team to do it for them. They want some other team to negotiate the damn contract, and then they just get to sign the dotted line, and he's their quarterback. So no matter what contract you offer Lamar, as long as you are willing to do it, the Ravens are willing to do it. And all you do, if you go that route... So the question you proposed was, would you rather go through with the Aaron Rodgers thing, as we pretty much know how it's going to play out, or it's not, or you get Lamar and you give up 2 first-round picks It is you lose out on Aaron Rodgers, you don't get Lamar, you roll into next season with Zach Wilson, and you get fired. The famous Ben Solak quote that will always guide how I judge what NFL front offices do is the number one job of an NFL GM is to keep their job. Everything comes second. Everything comes second. And there is no seat hotter, despite great drafting and overall team building, than Joe Douglas because he hasn't figured out quarterback. And Aaron Rodgers, as much of a head case as he is, as annoying and as news dominating as that will be, he is a quarterback who just recently won back-to-back MVPs, who you know will provide a certain level of play, and who you know for a fact once you sign on the dotted line, he is your damn quarterback. Or nothing.
So you're not wrong at all, obviously. I'm not going to argue with that. This was just more of like, if this was available to them. I understand.
Oh, obviously I'd take the Lamar side. Obviously, like, not a question. People, easiest decision I've ever made, but it's not realistic. It couldn't happen.
But you do make a good point, because if he's willing to take that 3-year deal, then like anybody that offers that to him, unless it's like something stupid, and like the Ravens are going to jump all over that, because that's what they've been saying.
Right.
But
yeah, that's another reason teams aren't really willing to do this, because they're not going to just abandon all other options to then ultimately lose. Like, you want the quarterback you can get.
So what I'll say, though, too, is like the reason I asked this question was mostly because of the fact that I've seen at different places people talk about that scenario. And more often than I would like to believe is happening, they're saying that they will take Aaron Rodgers.
Well,
and like that's with the assumption that they could get, not like offering Lamar a contract that he won't.
I know. Well, but that goes into something deeper about how like you have casual fans versus actual people who like watch football.
True. Yeah. I just thought it was interesting that this.
And until Brady retired, you were gonna have a portion of fans every single year being like, "Oh yeah, no, Tom Brady's the best quarterback going to the league," and it's like, no, he hasn't been for a little bit, but like we'll let you talk whatever you want to say. So like that's the problem. There is like it's Aaron Rodgers. So yeah, you're gonna have a lot of people on Twitter who are like, "Oh yeah, it's Aaron Rodgers. I want Aaron Rodgers on my team," but like no, not anymore. If it was like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe, or the past 2 years, 3 years, or not 2 years, but excluding last year, the 2 years before that, the MVP seasons, maybe, but like
it's tough. I think it's really the thing I'm going to end the show on is it really sucks, and I understand like Lamar's being kind of misled, and I think that's part of it, and I think there's a lot going on with it, but like it really sucks that he isn't going to probably get the deal that he probably should deserve, and it just I don't think it's going to happen. Something's going to happen where he has to take less, or something weird's going to happen. Maybe it is playing on the tag. I don't know. It's just going to be.
That's the point I brought up in the pre-show. Is as much as people want to say like, oh well, you can't factor this into it. You have to factor into the case that unfortunately for Lamar Jackson, he was not available at the time, and only one franchise so far has shown that they are willing to put out a deal of Deshaun Watson's caliber. Whether that's fair to Lamar or not, like that is a completely different question, because should he get that deal in the terms of is it fair? 100%. But as I said earlier in the show, the NFL is a business, and all the other 31 teams are looking at that deal and being like, you suck. I hate you for doing that, because this makes things impossible now. Because for a lot of quarterbacks, they're going to sit there and if I had to guess of anything, for Lamar, it's about the longevity and what he is on the field and whether or not he will be available 2 to 3 years down the road. And while I get that, all right, then get your money right now. Like Schwartz said, but I can understand that thought process because of the amount of of freak injuries that I'd be like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, so I think really interesting point you just made is if Lamar is approaching this from the idea of I can't take only a 2 to 3 year deal because my body might not hold up. The NFL's pretty damn aware of that too. So why are they going to fully guarantee a 5-year deal?
And that's why the Ravens are tired of having this conversation, because they can't do anything more without causing more damage. We had this conversation already.
I know in the overall ATB chat, I was saying it earlier this week. I'm just annoyed with the whole thing because it's a negotiation. You have to make your concessions. You can't get every single point you want and make sure the other side loses on every single. You have to be realistic, and that's just something that's not happening right now. The smartest thing you can do is take the Laramie Tunsil deal, but extrapolate it to a quarterback's value, and just continuously do that. Just continuously do that. If you get hurt and you lose out, oh no, you made $150 million and you had a damn great time. That's what you were going to make even if you got the long-term deal. Like, it's take the super QB friendly deals you are getting offered, even though they're not everything you want, they are still really damn good and better than anybody not named Deshaun Watson is getting. So that's like, I'm just getting a little bit tired of it. It's like, it's a negotiation. You got to treat it as such and know that you're not going to get everything you want.
And we're talking about Lamar Jackson, where like, okay, yeah, injuries are one thing, but this is a unique player to where like, no, you have to consider the fact that for some reason this man gets sick a lot and has missed a lot of games this year for just getting sick. That is not like something
we all know the one Cleveland game too. That was
but it's not.
Well, the Paul Pierce special out, man.
That's not very typical of a player. And honestly, I do not fault the Ravens if that's something that they're like, hey man, we could give you this money.
Weird,
like you need to get into a you gotta get into a bubble. Like what the heck? Did you not learn anything from COVID? Like, did you wash your hands?
Bring the NBA bubble back.
Like that. Like there's so many like Tony just said. It's a negotiation. Concessions have to be made. I understand that Lamar probably that he wants and probably fairly deserves, based on what the Browns did, a contract of that caliber. Unfortunately, you're going to have to take some concessions and realize it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's just what it is. But that'll do it.
That's why
for us this week. Yeah, that'll do it for us this week. We'll be back hopefully next week again. We're going to try to keep it going again now. Talk about anything else that happens. Mostly at this point, probably going to start focusing on draft stuff because there'll be some more free agency stuff trickling in. There's a couple guys still out there, like C.J. Gardner-Johnson still out there. That's an interesting. I kind of want to see where he goes now that I don't think I can't imagine the Eagles can possibly bring him back too. That secondary, they can't keep it whole all together. But we'll see what happens with him. But that'll do it for us this week, and we hope to see you back next week.